are in the office are working from home. Thank you for that. Okay, I'm going to make a start because we've got a few people on now. So welcome everybody and thank you for joining me. My name is Elizabeth Wass. I'm a HR business partner with Clover HR. I've got over 20 years experience in HR and more recently have developed a passion for promoting mental health awareness in the workplace. So to set the scene, with the recent pandemic and isolation, there's been a huge rise in mental health issues. So being more aware of mental health conditions, how to promote positive mental health in the workplace, and how to have difficult conversations around mental health has got to be a good thing. And that's whether you're a manager or an employee yourself. I think all of that is helpful. So if I just move on, if you've been to one of our webinars before, you might have seen this page before. This is our Clover HR team, or part of the team. We are a HR consultancy provider for small and medium-sized businesses. There are over 20 HR business partners like myself now across the UK, and we are your trusted HR advisors. We have a range of specialisms within the team, ranging from employee relations, recruitment, mental health and well-being, mediation services, coaching, reward, and many more. So if you do need any HR support, please give us a shout. In terms of questions, it's quite difficult for me to see the chat as I'm running through the slides. So if you do have a question, please make a note of it, write it down, and I'll ask for questions at the end if there are any. Or if we're running short of time, you can send those to me on email afterwards. Okay, so let's get started. So we're here to talk about how to improve mental health in the workplace, and what we're going to cover today is the size of the hidden problem of mental health. We're going to talk about the stress container, how we all have everyday stress and how we manage and deal with it. The impact of work on our stress levels, common mental health disorders, stigma and discrimination, unconscious bias and judgments around mental health, promoting well-being at work, having those difficult conversations and a guide for them, and a well-being action plan, both from a proactive point of view and if we've got someone in difficulties, and also where to go for further advice and support. So hopefully that will be useful to everybody. So to kick us off then, some stats for you on mental health. So this is a big problem and it's not going to go away. Work plays a strong role in our mental health and it provides social contact and support. It keeps us physically and mentally active. It allows us to develop and use our skills. It gives us a social status. It gives us a sense of identity, of personal achievement, and it provides us a way for us to structure and occupy our time. So work has a hugely positive influence on our mental health. But as we can see from the stats on the slide, a huge amount of people suffer from mental health issues, and it's estimated 1 in 4 in any given year. So that's huge. And as we can see, 1 in 5 of adults have experienced some kind of mental health issue or depression in early 2021. That was before the pandemic, and some of the press are reporting it's likely to be much bigger now. And you can see there that almost half of work-related ill health is related to stress, anxiety or depression, and it accounts for more than half of the working days lost. And finally, in those stats, unfortunately, there are a high number of suicides, and 3/4 of those are in men, and particularly males aged 45 to 49 have the highest suicide rate, and for females 50 to 54. And the rates are increasing for under 25s at the moment. So this is a huge problem that we're talking about in summary. So the next slide shows a picture of the stress container, and I think this is a nice way to kind of remember it and think about our stress levels. So everybody has this stress container, the funnel. The size of our funnels will vary. How we can cope with stress varies between us. Some of us will have bigger funnels, some of us will have smaller funnels, and we will all have stress going into the top of this container. What that stress is for each individual will be different, but some of those stresses might be caused by money, by work, by family situations or relationships, and by our health, as well as other things. So all of that kind of stress is coming into the top of the container. And if too much stress is going into that container at the top, we can get the container overflowing. So problems then start to develop. We start to get more irritable, less able to cope with that stress, and it's causing emotional snapping here on the slide. There is a way to relieve the pressure out of the bottom of the funnel, as you can see, and helpful ways to relieve the stress are things like exercising, social support, talking to people, and letting out some of that stress by just by communicating to someone. Sharing the problem can often help alleviate some of the stress. Unhelpful strategies which cause a blockage at the bottom of this container are things like turning to alcohol, working longer hours. It may be we're working longer to avoid a situation at home, or avoiding talking about things, and generally kind of the sense of stress just bottling up and feeling worse and worse. That blocks the funnel at the bottom, and then again it's not able to flow out. So we're going to talk a little bit later about different ways of relieving the stress out of our container. But I think this is a nice way to show that we've all got stresses. We're all coping with some kind of stress on a day-to-day basis. And whether that becomes a mental health issue or not, we'll talk about as we go through. So what is the impact of work on those stress levels that we've just talked about? So work and non-work related factors can cause poor mental health. And it's difficult as an employer to influence those non-work related factors. So, you know, where someone might have financial pressures at home, where there's relationship problems, where there's caring responsibilities, or whether that be for older or younger relatives. But what we can influence as an employer is the work-related ones. So that's what we're going to focus a bit more on today. So obviously changes at work can cause more stress for our employees. So things like restructures, redundancies are the kind of obvious ones. But even smaller ones, things like team changes, a manager changing, someone's role changing, their day-to-day job changing, and new people coming into the team, all of that can have an impact on our stress levels. Also, working extra hours can exacerbate some of the stress that we might be feeling at work. And it's not necessarily supportive if someone's already got a mental health condition such as anxiety or depression. Having regular breaks away from our desk, a walk at lunchtime, getting outside, getting some fresh air, talking to a colleague, catching up with someone, having a coffee with them, all of that can again help to alleviate some of the stress we're feeling at work. And during the pandemic, I think we've all recognised when we've been working from home, we've missed those kind of water cooler conversations, those informal chats that you have on the way into work when you stop at someone's desk. It's been much harder to have that conversation, and it's led to more isolation, which can also have that knock-on effect on our mental health. A culture of presenteeism that can be set from the top of the organisation also doesn't help with the amount of stress we feel at work. So rather than being focused on the amount of time people spend at their laptop or at the desk, it's better to focus on the outputs. What have they actually delivered that day, rather than the amount of hours they've been sat at their desk. And as managers and as leaders, you can set examples in terms of having those breaks away from your desk, having a walk at lunchtime and talking about it in the meeting after lunch, or in terms of flexibility that you might show to others at work, or that you might have yourself, you know, so leaving early to go to a parents' evening or picking the children up from school one day. Why not share that with some of your staff, and let them know that that is available to them as well. Obviously, relationships with managers are absolutely key to stress and to mental health at work. Knowing your team as a manager and knowing when something is wrong is really important, and having that open relationship where someone can come and talk to you when they need some help and support or are struggling is really important. And having regular touch points throughout the day, just checking in with people, even if they're working from home, we can do that, you know, WhatsApp, chat, message, email, but it shows, you know, that we're kind of thinking of them, that we're checking in with them. And things like having a daily virtual huddle, again, not the same as having one in the office, which we might be able to get back to soon. But, you know, having it virtually where, again, we can do it a little bit more informally, checking in with people, checking in on workload, who can maybe help somebody else out, where are we at in terms of tasks being completed. All of that can, again, help to alleviate some of the stress at work. So now we're going to move on to talking about what the common mental health disorders are, and I'm going to focus on anxiety and depression. So everybody has a level of anxiety. We all function with an amount of anxiety. It's a natural response to avoid dangerous situations. But where anxiety becomes longer lasting, more severe, and it starts to interfere with our work and our relationships, it becomes more of a problem. So the physical symptoms to look out for with anxiety are things like panic attacks, palpitations, shortness of breath, and 1 in 4 of us will have a panic attack in our life. So this is quite common. Other physical symptoms are things like dizziness, headaches, sweating, diarrhea, vomiting, muscle aches and pains. And then the psychological effects are excessive worrying, lower concentration, difficulty in making a decision, feeling more irritable, impatient, perhaps angry, more restless. And often people avoid social situations. So you might see someone withdrawing more, perhaps on a Zoom or even in a meeting or a work environment, you know, just generally avoiding those social situations. And then secondly, depression. So again, depression is quite common, and we often use that term to describe when we're feeling down, when we're feeling sad, and that would be a sort of short-term depressed mood. From a more clinical sense, depression is where it lasts for at least 2 weeks, and it starts to affect a person's behaviour. Again, there's physical and emotional symptoms that can then start to interfere with work and relationships. So some common symptoms of depression are things like loss of enjoyment, loss of interest, again, mood swings, crying, being withdrawn, less energy, less confidence, lower self-esteem, feeling guilty about things, overly worrying about things, again, difficulty in concentrating, difficulty sleeping, a loss of interest in food, or equally, some people turn to food and start overeating when they're depressed. It can result in feelings of suicidal, and it can result in people having a lack of attention to their personal hygiene and their personal appearance. So early warning signs during the pandemic, again, could be people not putting their cameras on, and people isolating from being in meetings. So next we're going to have a discussion around stigma and discrimination. So a number of things can impact a person's mental health and their recovery, and stigma and discrimination are at the top of the list. So this can include attitudes of rejection, stigma towards people with mental health issues, and wider inequalities in society. And the World Health Organization quote there shows that people with mental health issues should be treated in the same way as those with physical health issues. The Equality Act 2010 obviously protects people at work, and there are protected characteristics associated with that act, and a number of those, 6 of those, really relate to mental health at work. So I'm going to talk through these 6 and how they relate to mental health. So the first one there is age. Some mental health issues are more common at different stages in life. So for example, younger people are more likely to suffer from self-harm as a means of coping. And schizophrenia is more likely to emerge in a 16 to 25-year-old, while older people may be more likely to suffer from depression. In terms of gender, women are more likely to experience depression, but men are more likely to attempt suicide. And again, women are more likely to have eating disorders, where men may be more likely to turn to alcohol or drug misuse. The next one on the list is disability. So mental health issues can be considered a disability where there is a significant impact on a person over a 12-month or longer period. So this means the law protects these employees against any form of discrimination, and the likely cost of a settlement is uncapped in a tribunal. A physical long-term disability may also restrict a person's social activity or activities outside of the house. So again, a physical disability may put them at higher risk of depression and mental health issues as well. Race and ethnicity is another protected characteristic. So there is evidence to show that a religious belief can help to maintain positive mental health and promote recovery. And sorry, I think I missed out race and ethnicity and jumped onto religion there. Sorry, race and ethnicity. So racism and inequality of care and language difficulties can make it more difficult for people to access help, and that also is an issue. And then finally on the list, sexuality. So LGBT communities are more likely to experience mental health issues and less likely to seek help. They may face things like discrimination, family rejection, isolation, and lower self-esteem, which again can all lead to mental health issues. So our next slide is called Window on the World, and this is trying to, in a picture way, show you that we all have a different frame of reference on the world. We all have a different way that we look at ourselves, the world around us. Our beliefs are unique to us, and our past experiences shape how we see that world in front of us. And the reason for showing this is that we all make unconscious judgments about different situations in everyday life, and they can stop us from truly listening to someone. And in a mental health sense, that can be someone who's approaching us, who wants to talk to us about something that they're finding particularly difficult. And some of those unconscious judgments may stop us from truly listening to that person. So some of the things that shape our frame of reference on the world are things like the cultural influences that we have, our level of education, our sexuality, our aspirations, our family situation and our family background, our age, the work that we do, our hobbies and interests, and our values, relationships and achievements. All of those things are unique to us and can shape the way that we unconsciously see the world around us. So by trying to understand where those judgments come from in our own unique world that we see, it can help us to put them aside, to be more conscious of those judgments, and then it can help us to really listen when we're in a situation. And I'll come back to this a little bit further on. So in terms of promotion, we've talked quite a lot there about mental health and some of the types of disorders and how work can impact our mental health. But what can we do to promote well-being at work? So the first one is really key here. Regular one-to-ones, regular communication is absolutely vital and can make a huge difference. It encourages us to have a good relationship with our manager, with the staff that we work with. It encourages openness. It helps us to share a problem, to talk about something, and just by talking about it, we can help to alleviate some of that stress that's building up. The second one on the list there is about taking regular holidays. So spreading our holidays throughout the year, giving us a regular break, time away from work, helps us to recoup, helps us to refresh and come back to work then more focused. Also having breaks during lunchtime, moving away from the desk, being physically active, having a walk, being in touch with nature in our break times, all of that can help us in terms of just alleviating the stress, just thinking of something different before we come back into that work environment. Working regular overtime also and longer working days can also impact our mental health. And as a manager or a leader, it's worth asking ourselves, why is that person working long hours? Is it because they have a lot of work on, or is it because they're trying to avoid a situation at home? Is it that we need to recruit, be that temporary, part-time, or is it that we can share the overtime across other people so that the burden isn't all on one person? Because the risk is, if it's one person doing regular overtime, we risk them burning out and having either physical health symptoms or mental health symptoms. Flexible working is another way to really promote well-being at work. We all have caring responsibilities, whether that's for elderly relatives, whether that's for young children. And by having some flexibility in the working day, it can really help to relieve a person's stress. So, allowing them to help pick up a child if there's an emergency situation or an illness. Those are times of real high stress, and knowing that there is a supportive, flexible employer can really make a difference in those situations. And on a more formal basis, people can make a flexible working request to us to reduce their hours or reduce their days. And as an employer, we have a legal duty to consider that request. We don't necessarily have to agree to the request, but we do need to consider it. And if you had one of those requests and needed some support, obviously reach out and we can help you with that situation. The next one on the list is diet and exercise. And you might think, as an employer, how can I influence that? Well, there are a couple of things we can do. We can encourage a good diet. We can promote it around the workplace. We can have healthy eating clubs. Some employers even offer free fruit in the workplace to encourage better diets. Again, sleep hygiene feels a little bit harder to influence. But by encouraging people to have regular sleep patterns, set bedtimes, that can really promote better sleeping and in turn better mental health. Keep learning is on there. By reviving an old interest or starting a new interest, taking on a new responsibility, fixing an old bike, decorating the house, trying a new recipe, they're all quite small things, but they can lead to a real sense of achievement and give us a real confidence boost, which in turn helps our mental health. EAP is employee assistance programs, and we can help you promote the use of those if you've got an existing program or if that was something that you wanted to introduce. So employee assistance can be a helpline that employees can access 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, to help them with things like financial, legal, counselling assistance. And it can be a go-to when someone is in a real time of stress and struggle. So again, we can help as Clover HR with putting something like that in place if that's something that you wanted to look at. And the other thing available is well-being monitoring tools. So you can survey employees through a tool. Those surveys are anonymous, but overall the employer can get some reporting of trends. What are the trends that people are feeling from a mental health basis? And how can we then target specific things that are, are the key topics for our employees? And one of the tools that Clover use and we promote is Luminum as a tool. And again, if you want to find out more about that, I can help you and we can show you a demo of that system. Okay, so moving on, having those difficult conversations. So I think it's natural for managers and fellow employees to not necessarily want to have a conversation around mental health, and where someone is suffering, it can be very difficult to approach that person. So this is a short guide to try and help someone in having that conversation, and the model here we use is called ALGIE, which is the acronym for the first letters in that list. So firstly, have a think about how you're going to approach that person. Find a space where you can talk openly and honestly, and where there's an amount of confidentiality, and really approach that situation with very open questions to see if they will open up, to see if they'll start to talk to us about what they might be facing. The second one there on the list, L, is listen. So in a non-judgmental way, we've talked about that window on the world. So put aside our feelings, our unconscious bias, and really truly listen to what the person is saying. Let them talk freely. Don't be afraid of silences. Don't think we need to interrupt them. Just let them kind of talk about what they want to say in relation to what they're struggling with. And it's important for us to show empathy with that person, put ourselves in their shoes and think about how that might feel. But empathy is quite different to sympathy. Sometimes in this situation, people don't want us to feel sorry for them. They don't want us to feel that kind of sympathy, but they do want us to show empathy. So have a think about those two. And again, with that listening technique, think about your body language. Think about having open body language, nodding your head, summarising, keeping eye contact. All of those things are showing that you're really listening to this person and you really want to help. The next one is give support, G in the ALGIE acronym. So offer emotional support and understanding, and really give the person hope that things can get better. Improvements can be made to that person's mental health. And then finally, E, encourage them to get the support that they need. And you are not necessarily the person responsible to give that support. There's lots of places and sources of getting support. So it could be that they need professional help. It could be pointing them in the direction of their doctor or a counsellor, or they might already be doing some CBT or some therapy work, and perhaps they need a little prompt to try and go back and start using that source. Family and friends are a massive point of support. So have they been talking to those people close to them? Have they been sharing what they're going through? Some people find support groups very helpful. There's lots of self-help strategies. People can find reading material very helpful. And obviously online, there are loads of resources available. Mind.org.uk is one I particularly like, and atimetoChange.org.uk is another one. And also on those websites, there's information not just for the person going through the mental health, but also those people that are supporting them. So if you find yourself in a supportive role, remember to take some care and look after yourself as well. And also another tool is a wellbeing action plan. And finally, respect confidentiality. If someone has opened up to you, if you've had a difficult conversation with them about their mental health, remember, to respect that confidentiality. In order for them to come and talk to you again, they are going to want to think that you are going to keep this conversation confidential. If you feel it would help to talk to other people, ask them ask them that you can do that. Ask them to give you consent to have that conversation with someone else if you feel that would be helpful. For example, with HR or with somebody else who you think could really help them. And only if we were really worried about someone's safety would I suggest that you break that confidence without their consent. Okay, so moving on to the Wellbeing Action Plan. So this is a tool that is available and it can be used proactively. It doesn't have to be used with someone who's suffering from a mental health condition. We can use this with any employee to promote health and wellbeing in the workplace. There's lots of wellbeing action plans available if you Google them, but the one I particularly like is on the Mind website. And if you Google Mind afterwards, you will be able to find it straight away. So it provides a practical way to improve and promote mental health in the workplace. And it's a template, a document that can really help the discussion and prompt some of the questions. So on the Mind website, there are 3 guides. There's a guide for managers in having the conversation. There's a guide for employees. And there's also a guide for working from home, which has been particularly helpful in the pandemic. So I'd kind of promote you to have a look at those. It's really helpful for the employee to complete first, have a look at the document, and then either give that to the manager before they talk or bring it to the conversation. And it can help structure the conversation then and structure conversations around mental health and well-being. And it can help us look at, for the employee to define what helps them keep well, what promotes their own mental health, and also what are their triggers for feeling unwell, what are the things that they know are not helpful to them individually. And again, that can then help the manager in looking out for those particular signs and symptoms. And again, confidentiality over the Wellbeing Action Plan is really important. Again, if as a manager you want to discuss that with HR, ask for the employee's consent before you have that conversation with HR, and explain to them why you as a manager might want HR support in having these conversations. Okay, and finally, my final slide. Where can we get further advice and support? I recognise this has been a whistle-stop tour of sort of mental health. So there may be some of you who want to, research more material or get some further help and support. So obviously, Clover, we're here to help you. If you've got an individual situation at work, either yourself or as a manager, please come and talk to us and we can help you with that particular case. We can also help run manager workshops to promote awareness and again help managers have some of those difficult conversations and to put those wellbeing action plans into place. And we can also look at introducing mental health champions into your workplace. So these are a bit like first aiders, people who are recognised as champions, people who are those go-to people that people want to open up and have conversations with, and not just to kind of leave them without any guidance, but actually to give them some training in terms of being a mental health champion and how they can have some of those conversations and also how they can look after themselves as being someone who supports others. We can also run wellbeing webinars or face-to-face sessions with all employees. I've run 1-hour sessions with all employees jumping onto a webinar to talk to them about promoting their own mental health, looking after mental health themselves. Again, things like the stress funnel, we can talk to them about how we all have stress, we all manage stress, but how do we all do that individually, and what are the useful ways that we can help each other. And then finally, online resources. I've already talked about Mind for the Wellbeing Action Plan, but there's lots of other resources available. And equally, keep an eye on our social media, Clover's social media. We have an ongoing free webinar programme, and mental health is going to be an ongoing topic that we keep keep going over in terms of these sessions. And also, Clover have just introduced podcasts. So if you're not in front of your screen, those moments driving in the car or walking the dog, in my case, you can keep up to date with all things HR related by listening to it on one of our podcasts. And finally, if you missed part of today or you missed any of the webinars, they are available on our YouTube channel. They're available on our website. And a previous session that was delivered was around stress management. Again, very common themes, and it might be something, if you're particularly interested in this topic, that you want to have a look at that recorded webinar. Okay, well, that brings me to the end of the session today. So I just want to say thank you very much for joining me. Thank you for attending, and really just to ask if there's any questions at this stage that anyone wants to ask me in the chat, or again, if anyone wants to email me, my email details are on the screen there. I will be happy to email you back afterwards. I think we have got something in the chat, so let me have a look. Okay, so Gaminda, hi Elizabeth, as staff have been working from home due to lockdown, but as offices begin opening and roles are required to work from site due to being a specific site role, how can staff be supported and encouraged back to a physical location? Really good question, and absolutely topical at the moment with the situation that we're all in with COVID. So really, I would encourage managers and senior leaders to be really open with their employees about coming back to the workplace, because there will be people naturally quite worried and anxious about this, and people who may have been isolating through physical conditions or even mental health conditions, and actually coming back to a physical location is a real difference to what they've been doing. So I think communication is absolutely key. And if you have someone in your team who is feeling like that, I would say pick up with them individually, have a chat through what does that look like for someone physically coming back to work, what are their personal concerns around it, and how can we help to alleviate some of those. And if it's possible, can we ease that person back into a physical location rather than it being suddenly back into the office 5 days a week? Can we build that back up, either by shorter working days in the office or by a hybrid of a few days in the office and a few days at home initially, just to get them back into that workplace and used to that physical location. So I hope that helps, Gaminda. I've also got another one here from David. Can we send out a copy of the presentation to go over with your management team? So great feedback, David. I'll take that as a compliment that you want to share it with your team. And yes, we absolutely can. We can share the material from today. And again, this recording will be on our website. So if you wanted to even play the recording and share it with the team, that would be absolutely fine as well. And Jez, thank you very much for the feedback there. That's great to hear that it's been useful. A couple of other comments there. So thank you very much, everyone. That's super nice to hear that response at the end. It's quite hard when you're presenting on these things to know how it's been received. So really appreciate that feedback. Daria, thank you very much as well. That's great to see. I know you've all got busy days ahead of you, and lots to do. So thank you all really very much for joining. And as I say, if you want to make a note of my email, I'm happy to get in touch afterwards as well. Thank you very much. I'm going to draw the session to a close there, and I hope you all have a good rest of the day. Thank you very much.